Hey Lord of the Rings fans, this is Menegroth, the Thousand Caves. Menegroth was a city of the Sindar Elves located within the kingdom of Doriath, which was ruled by King Elwë Thingol and his queen and wife Melian the Maya. And it was also the home to their daughter Luthien Tenuvial, the most beautiful elf to ever exist. Now, prior to the First Age, during the time of the Two Trees, and before the return of Melkor, Beleriand was ruled by the Sindar alone, and it was a time of great peace. But Melian, having great foresight, predicted that this peace would not last forever, and she told her husband Thingol this. Now, Thingol actually listened, and he looked for a place of strength to defend against this evil. And so he commissioned the dwarves of Belegost, located in the Blue Mountains, who he had a great working relationship with, and they did trade with, to help build this place of strength. So they picked a spot in the forest of Rhaegon on the southern banks of the Esgalduin River, in a great hill that rose from the ground to build this place of strength. And the dwarves delved so many caverns and so many halls. They delved them so great and so deep and so many that the place was named Menegroth, the Thousand Caves. Now, the dwarves weren't alone in this labor. They did most of the labor and the delving and the carving of the rock, but the pillars and the decorations were done by the Sindar elves, who carved out animal depictions and flowers. And Menegroth was vibrant and beautiful and colorful, and it was decorated with many things, and many birds lived there, especially nightingales, who were there because of Queen Melian the Maya. And Menegroth was held to be the fairest dwelling of any king east of the sea. And Melian and her peoples had woven tapestries that depicted the histories of Valinor, Middle-earth, and shadows of things to come. Really, really interesting. Now, the dwarves usually charged for their labor, but Melian gave them great knowledge and great wisdom of the history of Middle-earth, and they also were given many great pearls that Thingol got from Círdan, who lived by the sea. And the dwarves hated the sea, so they didn't get to see pearls. So pearls were very precious to them. And one of these pearls was named Nymphalos. It was the size of a dove's egg, and it was treasured beyond all wealth by the chieftain of Belegost. And so the dwarves helped carve out and create Menegroth, the Thousand Caves. Now, after the return of Melkor to Middle-earth, the battles of Beleriand begin. And the first battle is fought between Melkor's forces, which he sent into Beleriand, and the Sindar elves. Now, fortunately, the Sindar were able to defeat and repel the forces of Morgoth with the help of the dwarves of the Blue Mountains and the Lyquindi elves of Osirian. But after that, Thingol and Melian decided to fence off their realm, and Melian, using her great power, created what's known as the Girdle of Melian, which encompasses the entire kingdom of Doriath. And it covers the forest of Rhaegon, which is the greater forest, and the northern forest of Neldareth. And it completely fences it off with an invisible force field. And nothing can get through this force field that doesn't have a power greater than Melian the Maya, or without the permission of King Thingol and his wife. And so we're going to see that throughout the history of Beleriand, nothing breaks through this force field except for a few things that were either stronger than Melian or they were driven by fate. Here's a few notable people who have entered Doriath and seen the majesty of Menegroth. Now, first and foremost, we have Beren, the son of Barahir of the House of Beor. He was someone who stumbled into Doriath through the Girdle of Melian. How did he get through the Girdle of Melian, you ask? Well, he was driven out of Dorthonion in the north by Sauron, and he went through great trials and hardship, going through the Valley of Dreadful Death known as Nandan Gortheb, and he came into the kingdom of Doriath by fate. Fate drove him and was stronger than Melian's magic, and he was allowed to enter because he fell in love with the daughter of Thingol and Melian, Luthien Tenuvial, and their love was fated, and it was so great. And he was brought to the palace of the Elf King in Menegroth, and he was in awe of its beauty and its majesty. He was just absolutely floored by it. But Thingol did not love that he was in love with his daughter, and he sent him on an impossible mission to find a Silmaril and bring it back to him. But that's a tale for another time. Now, next we have Turin Turambar. Turin Turambar of Hiflum and Dorloman, the son of Hurin Thalion. He was fostered in Menegroth, which is amazing. He was fostered by Thingol and Melian, but something happened and he fleed. I don't even know how to describe it because I can't say he was forced, but he decided to flee. And that's definitely a tale for another time. But Turin Turambar also lived in Menegroth, and he was allowed to enter by Thingol's leave. So, most notably, Finrod Felagond, who was the great nephew of Thingol, was always allowed to come and visit Menegroth, and he got the idea to build his great kingdom of Nargothrond from Thingol himself, who gave him the location. Now, his youngest sister, Galadriel, lived in Menegroth, and being that Thingol was her great uncle, she was allowed to enter the kingdom of Doriath, and she lived in Menegroth for a great time. She learned a great many things from Melian the Maya herself. If I'm not mistaken, she learned the baking of limbus bread, and she also learned great many enchantments from Melian. So that's really cool. Now, throughout the history of Beleriand, Doriath and Menegroth survived for a very long time. They were literally hidden, and it's known as the Hidden Kingdom. And so throughout the wars of Beleriand, they were hidden except for that first battle. After the girdle was set upon there, orcs weren't able to enter, and the marches, which are the borders of Doriath, were guarded very closely. A great elven captain named Mablong of the Heavy Hand was in charge of the guard, and also one of the chieftains of the March Wardens was known as Beleg Strongbow. He was magnificent at fighting, and he also fought alongside of Turin Turambar, who was an excellent fighter. So they were very well protected, and like I said, nothing could enter that kingdom. So it is known as Doriath, the Hidden Kingdom, and Menegroth was its stronghold. Now, the downfall of Menegroth actually began when Thingol received the Silmaril from Beren. Beren completed his quest and was able to marry Luthien, and everything was great. Thingol was happy, and he received the Silmaril. And then later he receives the Nauglamir from Hurin Thalion. Now he possesses the two greatest treasures in all of Beleriand. And so he gets this idea to combine them. And so he commissions the dwarves of Nogrod to combine the Silmaril into the Nauglamir, the necklace of the dwarves. And he'll have the greatest treasure necklace ever. And so the dwarves do their work in the halls of Thingol in Menegroth. And unfortunately for Thingol, they decide not to give him the Nauglamir when they're done. They want to keep it, and they want to keep the Silmaril. And Thingol berates them and calls them names, and he doesn't think of his danger, and the dwarves surround and kill him. And the dwarves try to escape with the Nauglamir. Obviously, they are caught and killed before they can escape Menegroth, but two of them do get out, and they make it back to Nogrod. Now, Melian is done with Beleriand at this point because her husband, her true love, is dead, and she goes back to Valinor. And when she does this, the girdle of Melian comes down, and Doriath and Menegroth are no longer protected. Now, the two dwarves that went back to Nogrod, they lie and say the dwarves were just killed unfairly by the elves, and because they didn't want to pay them. And so the dwarves go to war, and they go in Doriath, and there's battle in Menegroth in the Thousand Caves, and they steal the Nauglamir with the Silmaril in it, and they kill Mablong, the chief guard. And you know, later in history, the dwarves get their comeuppance, and they get defeated, and the Nauglamir is returned. But you know, Menegroth is messed up at that time. But later, it is then taken over by Beren and Luthien's son Dior, and it is brought back to its majesty as well as Doriath. But unfortunately, the seven sons of Feanor try to attack Dior and his peoples, who now possess the Nauglamir with the Silmaril because they inherited it. And in what's known as the Second Kingslaying, Doriath is completely destroyed along with Menegroth, and the daughter of Dior, Elwing, escapes and flees to the havens of Sirion, and this is where she has Elrond and Elros with Eärendil. That is the end of Menegroth.